Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you like the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar sponsored by Your Dog's Friend. Our topic is how to use patterns, explained by Leslie McDevitt in her books on Control Unleashed, a training protocol that helps dogs stay calm and focused and learn training skills. Our speaker, Angie Madden, is the trainer and owner of Dog Speak in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and is certified as both a dog trainer and a Control Unleashed instructor. Angie teaches Control Unleashed classes at Your Dog's Friends training facility in Rockville, Maryland. She came to dog training after working in aquariums and zoos, a background that gave her a unique perspective on animal behavior. Please put your questions in chat. We will try to get to as many questions as possible. Some of you also may not realize that Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit. Your donations help support these webinars and our other free services. So please consider going to the donations icon at the top of our homepage to donate. We appreciate your support. I know that we will all learn a lot from today's webinar. It's all yours, Angie.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm assuming everybody can see my shared screen. Yes, you can see it. Thumbs up. Yes. Yay. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, let's get started. So as Deborah said, I am a certified Control Unleashed instructor. Some of you may have already seen the first webinar that I gave on Control Unleashed. It was sort of an overview of all of the different Control Unleashed exercises and protocols. And so if you're familiar with that, you're not going to see anything new today, but what I'm hoping is that you're going to see what those next steps are. So you're familiar with the patterns, you're familiar with Control Unleashed, and how do you take that out of the classroom and apply it to the real world. So let's get started. So that's sort of my goal for today. We're going to look at taking these skills from the classroom and how to be able to successfully apply them to real life. So we're going to talk about setting your dog up for success, what I mean by step-by-step progressions, creative ways to use pattern games, and I'm going to sort of categorize these for using Control Unleashed at home, on walks, and in public places. So before we get into that, I just want to take a moment to talk about foundations, because Control Unleashed is really meant to be used as a program. So the pattern games are fantastic and I love them and they're great to use, but you will get the most benefit if you start with these foundations. And it was interesting, as I was making this webinar, there were a lot of things that I wanted to include. And it was like, well, I can't do that unless I'm focusing on some of these other Control Unleashed skills that and we're supposed to be focused on pattern games. So you really can't take these out of the patterns. But if this is your first introduction to Control Unleashed and you are not familiar with the patterns, you're going to get some great information here today. But I do highly recommend that you check out what the foundations are all about, because these are really essential skills. Essentially, your dog learning how to relax. We don't want them constantly on. We need them to be able to flip that off switch and then look at that. And those of you that are familiar with look at that, even though I'm doing pattern games, you're going to see a lot of look at that, because it's so fundamental in everything that I do with my dogs. So again, if you are not familiar with those, feel free to check out the Control Unleashed webinar that I gave. It looks like it was February 5th of 2022, and that is on the Your Dog's Friend YouTube page. All right, so when we are doing Control Unleashed, and really with any training protocol, it is essential that your dog is not above threshold. So what do we mean when we use this term threshold? The Merriam-Webster dictionary definition is the point at which a physiological or psychological effect begins to be produced. And so what this is going to look like for a lot of dogs, and I'm going over the more subtle things. Everybody knows that a dog that is barking and lunging on leash is definitely over threshold. You know, there's some overreaction going on here. But I really want you to recognize the things that occur before we get to that point, because ideally, we're going to be able to intervene and use these skills to, you know, to sort of get out of dodge and get out of that scenario that's going to get us to those more overt signs. So these are the more subtle signs that your dog may be going over threshold. Starting to take treats harder. So, you know, you've got a dog that's really gentle with treats and suddenly they're biting down a little bit harder. That is definitely a sign of arousal, which can mean that your dog is approaching threshold. Intense staring or difficulty disengaging, your dog is locked onto something and they're not responding to your marking or other things like that. Or even if they are disengaging, it's really difficult and they're sort of getting stuck. Ignoring or refusing treats, definitely a red flag. Vocalizing, obviously. Body tension is another thing that we look for. When your dog is above threshold, there's no learning occurring. So we're not really training in that scenario. And that's sort of what I refer to as the get out of dodge scenario. So, you know, when your dog gets out of threshold, your goal is just to successfully, with a minimum of stress, use those emergency protocol skills that you have, your U-turn or your backup recall or whatever it is that you use to get your dog moving in away from those scenarios. And it's going to happen. It happens to all of us. Professional trainers, you know, we also reach those points where something unexpected happens, or we think that we've set our dog up for success and whoops, we miscalculated. So everybody's going to have those situations where the dog is going to go over threshold. And at that point, we're not trying to teach them anything. We're just trying to get them far enough away that we can bring them back under threshold, back into that operant state where learning can occur and they're actually thinking instead of just reacting. And at that point, we can use these skills. And of course, our goal is that these skills are going to help us get to the point where the dog doesn't go out of thinking mode, but there's a lot between here and there. All right, and then the last note is successful training and counter conditioning sessions often appear uneventful. That's what we want it to look like. We want somebody from the outside having no idea that there's any training occurring. It's just an everyday thing. All right, so how do we build these successful patterns? The key is to introduce the pattern in a calm, quiet setting, because we want the dog to have that feeling of security and calmness associated with this pattern. And then we start to build things into the pattern. So we add a helper, someone that the dog is comfortable with, that they know. The dog starts to learn, oh, sometimes in this pattern, somebody's moving around in the background. Or sometimes when I'm playing this game, that person has a toy. Or maybe I hear something. And so we're slowly adding stuff into the pattern in a way that it just becomes part of the pattern. That's when we're doing it successfully, when the dog is able to notice something but come right back into the pattern. They're not leaving the pattern to have to go investigate, or they're not reacting to that stimulus. And then over time, we slowly start to add things in. So we might be increasing the intensity. So your helper isn't just standing there, they're moving around. Or maybe they have a toy. Maybe, we want to start with something that's not as exciting and then maybe move up to something that's more exciting. If we hit those points where the dog does leave the pattern, that's data. Whoops, we went a little too far, too fast. We're going to back up a little bit and maybe find an intermediate step between where the dog was successful and where we lost them. And so I always think of it as a conversation. We're taking in what our dog is telling us and responding according to that. And we're always asking questions. And then as we've slowly increased the intensity, then maybe it's time to start over. Maybe we start over with a different helper, or maybe we go through the same steps in a different environment. The point that I want you to take away from here is you have to set your learner up for success in order to have a foundation to build on. So we have to have a successful starting point, and then we can slowly start going up those stairs. So you're going to see that stair analogy again here. So this is my homemade graphic here, but I sort of wanted to really illustrate a lot of times what happens is we learn these skills and we're like, oh my gosh, these are amazing. And I want to take them and go. So we teach the pattern, the dog learns the pattern, and then we're in a real life situation. Okay, I want to use this on my walk when I see another dog. And a lot of times that's just too big of a step. The dog can't climb to that next step. And so the way to really help them get to the top of those steps, which is really where our goal is to have a lot of steps for them to climb up. And I'm not going to go over all the things I put in here, but I just sort of did some sample of what those increments might look like. And so we want to make it easy for your dog to reach the next step. All right, so now let's get into some cases and examples. So before we do, I want you to meet my dog, Obi-Wan Kenobi. We adopted him in February of 2021. He was an adult dog. They estimated between 2 and 4 years, so we don't really know how old he is. He is an adult pit mix. He does struggle with barrier reactivity. He loves people unless they're on the other side of a barrier, or they're jogging, or they're riding bikes. And I don't know that it's that he doesn't like them, but they are definitely too much for him. It's a little too intense. He loves kids, sometimes a little too much. That is definitely a scenario that can cause some over-arousal behaviors. His tendency is to go towards stimulus. Sometimes it's because he wants to greet. He really likes to get up by people's faces. It's not something where he's jumping up, but he does have a tendency to get up because he wants to sniff or like a little bit. It's very gentle, but he really does like faces, and not everybody's comfortable with that. Sometimes it's information seeking. It's not that he wants to greet, but he's concerned. He has some concerns and he wants more information. And sometimes it's over arousal. And depending on the scenario, all three of those may not be the best. Are certainly not necessarily what we want. And so setting him up for success definitely includes the appropriate distance where he is making a better choice. So that getting closer to something is not always the best choice for him, because, if he's information seeking and he has made his decision and his decision is not good, then we're too close. And so there's a lot of management involved in working with him, but he's a really sweet dog, loves to snuggle, loves people. And he has been such a trooper with all of the training that we have done to try and make videos for this webinar. So here he is at the beach, having a good time. All right, so let's get started. We are going to start with at home, ways to use pattern games and for challenges at home. So a lot of these are going to be actual clients or class participants that we have gone through, and they have brought up a very specific challenge that they're having with their dog. And these are some of the ways that we have gone through and done some coaching with them in class. Sometimes it's going to be videos that they submitted to me. And sometimes it's going to be sort of the finished where we are now. So this first one was a class participant, and her dog Anchor was not very excited about toys. He's very connected to her. And so when I asked, what is something that tends to get him worked up? One of the things that she came up with was leaving the house. He will start whining. He gets worked up with this process. Just a note that it's not separation anxiety. It's not that he's getting worked up about being left alone, because it happens both when they are leaving together, and if they are leaving him home, he settles immediately. And so it's not that, it's just that whole process of, oh my gosh, someone's putting on shoes, or they've picked up their keys, or they've picked up their purse. Oh my gosh. That sort of adrenaline comes on board. So I suggested that we do off switch in class, because we want off switch is a pattern. I should say this first, where the dog gets a little bit excited and then practices calming down, and then gets a little bit excited and then practices calming down. And so our goal with this pattern is to essentially allow the dog to learn to regulate their arousal level. A lot of dogs struggle with getting up here and they can't get themselves back down. They don't know how to transition out of that very high excited state back down from that. And so the off switch pattern game is a way of introducing this concept. And again, we want to introduce it at an increment that the dog is successfully able to calm back down. So this is what happened in class. Oh, hopefully we have, oh good, we have. And now you're going to pick up your jacket and put it on.
Okay.
And I'm going to have you, just do what you're doing and try and position yourself so that the mat is between the two of you. If he cannot settle with you wearing the jacket, I'm going to have you take it back off. Oh, good. Yeah, and we're going to do exactly what we were before. So you just breathe. I like that. I like the nice relaxed position. Let's see if we can get him to settle back into it down. Beautiful.
Yes.
Or anything that might have the same reaction. I love that he stayed on the mat. So go ahead. Oh, look at that. Yep, and just same thing where we're just going to breathe and feed for being nice and calm on the mat.
Put our shoes on. Boy.
Very nice. All right, so you could see that that was literally the very first time that we did that with him, how quickly he picked up on that mat as an option, that association of settling on the mat and being nice and calm, and pairing them with that stimulus that caused the whining. You could see that by the third rep, we did get a little bit of whining. I don't know if that was because it was the third time we had done something that signaled leaving, or if the shoes were a bit more intense than the other stuff. But Becky continued to work with him on this skill. And so this last part was what it looks like when they leave now. So he has done fantastic with that. I will note that this is only when she's by herself. She did say that when it's with her husband, they still get a little bit of whining, and she hasn't worked through it. So, sometimes it's going to look different to the dog in those different scenarios. And so we do have to go through that same thing, having him learn that he can settle even when the two of them are getting ready to leave. Okay, and I did forget to mention the whining. So I will try and give you some warnings in case you have dogs there with you, and some of the sounds might be a little triggering for them. So here's another live class session. This is Coco, and Coco had a tendency to play keep away with toys. And so this was actually the cooperative care and counter conditioning class. And so we had gone through the protocol of voluntary sharing, where essentially the dog has control of a resource. And so the dog basically says someone or another animal can have access to a resource. And so I thought, let's try pairing that skill with the off switch game and see if that structure helped Coco to choose to ask for interaction. So instead of playing keep away with the toy, oh, come chase me, oh, it's mine, you can't get it, seeking, hey, here's the toy, I want you to play with it with me. And so that was our end goal. And unfortunately, I did not think to put the before video on here, but even at the beginning of this class, a lot of times when there was disengagement with the toy, Coco would start off playing with the toy before you saw what you're going to see in this video.
This time. So since he chose not to go after it when you tossed it, this time I'm going to have you go ahead and interact with him with it. So yep, invite him to play, just a short little play session, and then you let go and see what he wants to do. So that's beautiful. Yep. And then wait for him to sit before you do any interacting with the toy. Or down. We'll take it down. So we'll take any of that position. So go ahead and hand feed and then pick up the toy. And then you're going to invite him to play again, because essentially he came over and targeted it to say, play with me more. So that's the start button. Yes, there we go. Little play, little excitement. And then you stop. Good.
So again, you can see how quickly he picked up on that pattern, that concept of, oh, you stopped playing with me. I really want you to play some more. I'm going to come settle down on the mat. I'm going to get a nice treat, and then we're going to start our play again. And that was, again, within one session. I didn't think to ask for how things are going now. And I do want to also note that it was a very short play session in this video. And so we were being very mindful of keeping it at a point that it was easier for Coco to make that choice, not getting too worked up. But obviously over time, we would like to increase that length or intensity, do some real play sessions, and then, give him that option. And that's where we would go from there. All right, let's keep going. All right, so on to a different concept. So this one is just going to be an example of me working through introducing the crate to Obi-Wan after we got him. I will say that this was Piper's crate, and he's taller than her, and so it is not really an appropriate size for him, but it's what I had at the time. And I wanted, again, I was making videos for a webinar, so I used what I had, but this is just going to be the step-by-step increment that I did with him. And the very first ping pong video is literally the first time he's even seen this crate or done anything with it. And it is going to be a fast run through. So the video is going to be going a little bit faster so that it's not too long. I forgot to properly prep this one. So, so I was working with Obi on the crate. And I don't have that video in here, but I was basically doing 1, 2, 3 with Obi in the crate, and the door to this room was closed and Piper was on the other side. And there was this little like bark in the background because she heard me playing the 1, 2, 3 game. And she was like, hey, I want to play. And so this day was like the next time I was setting up to play the game, and I literally turned around and Piper was in the crate looking at me like, hey, it's my turn. So I just love that as a demonstration of the power of 1, 2, 3. And I chose to put Piper's in here, like what I did with her versus him, because I was able to go farther faster because she was previously crate trained. I would not have moved that quickly with a dog that had not been comfortable with the crate or was first being introduced. I would have moved a little slower with the door, or maybe over a couple sessions. So now we're going to do some troubleshooting with the crate. So again, this is a class participant. This video is not from in class. This was actually after the class had finished. This is her puppy Quest, who ended up with some medical issues. And at the time they had been, with the diagnosis, they weren't exactly sure. And so crate rest was basically what they thought they were going to have to do for a very long period of time. And so Quest had been in the crate pretty much with the exception of potty breaks for several weeks, if not a month at this point. And prior to that, he had done great with the crate. Safe place where he slept, loved it. At this point, there was some definite aversion to going into the crate because of that. Again, puppy, lots of energy, lots of activity. It's really hard to be in the crate all the time. And so this was a video that she took of training sessions with Quest to try and get him back to where he was with the crate. And so she came up with using the Give Me a Break game, which is essentially the dog requesting that you continue a specific exercise or coming back to re-engage with you and say, hey, I want to keep doing this. And so we use a treat that we set on the ground for the dog to eat, and then we walk away. And it's up to the dog to come re-engage us. The dog is free to make any choices. The dog could go off and sniff. The dog could go off and play. They could go do whatever they want. But if they are coming back to us, they are essentially saying, yes, I'd like to do another rep of this. And so this is sort of in the middle of that. So this isn't like the very first time she started doing this with him. So she is putting the treat in the crate, as opposed to, we probably would have started off just putting it in front of the crate. Are you comfortable with that? Okay. Do you want to eat a treat, a little bit inside the crate? Okay, great. You're telling me you want to keep doing that. So that's what it might look like. But here, let's see a real live version. Okay, let me play this video and then I'm going to answer some questions because we have a lot of questions on this. You can see those back feet. I'm not sure I want to put my back. Oh, there he goes. You can see he moved a little bit further away from the crate. And the back feet stayed out again. So you can still see that slight discomfort. But he's able to settle. I love that he went back there of his own volition to check it out again. And she did share a current video. So this is what it looks like with Quest in the crate as of yesterday. All right, so Deborah, do you want me to go through and look at the chat questions, or are you going to read them out? How do you want to do that?
I'll read them out because there's other stuff going on in there. Alyssa wants to know if we should practice with a bear crate, or is it okay if we have all their bedding and toys in there to start before they use it?
My recommendation would be to have all of that comfortable stuff in there. I just didn't with the ping pong because he was just going in and out. It might have been better to have something comfy to walk on. But my thought is our end goal is for the crate to be a comfortable, safe space. So the more we can make it comfortable for the dog, lots of comfy stuff, lots of great smells, lots of great association. You can have all of that in there and still do the pattern games. Great question.
All right. And someone else wants to know if your dog walks away during the 1, 2, 3 game, does it mean that they're too distracted, overwhelmed?
Great question. And a lot of my answers are going to be, it depends. So I personally accept a dog disengaging from me in the counting process, as long as the dog is coming back on 3. If they're looking at other things, or maybe the head is down sniffing, but the second they hear that 3, they pop back up and look at me. I'm okay with that, as long as there isn't something that they are either fixating on, or I am using this particular pattern to get us past. So if the dog is likely to get stuck, if the dog is likely to go over threshold, if I'm just walking and doing 1, 2, 3 to get some loose leash walking, I'm going to have a little more leeway in what I am going to accept as my dog is still in the pattern, versus those other situations. So if I essentially want my dog to be like in heel position as I'm 1, 2, 3 walking, I'm going to set that up. I might start off by counting a little bit faster, so have a higher rate of reinforcement. I am definitely going to be paying attention if my dog's immediately disengaging and leaving me, or orienting to whatever that may be. And in that scenario, that would indicate that I definitely need to change things up a little bit. So hopefully that did answer.
The last question at this point, GMAB is what?
Oh, I apologize. I think I did say it. Give me a break. Okay, is what it stands for.
Penny's question is, could you use GMAB with objects the dog is fearful of approaching, like the vacuum cleaner?
You could, but I would be really careful in treat placement. I might even set it up that the treats are moving away from the vacuum. So like the reinforcer is being moved away from the vacuum. So if the dog, like I might stand not necessarily close to the vacuum, but I'll stand in the vicinity of the vacuum. If the dog approaches me, I'm going to reinforce them by moving them away from it. And so the dog is approaching me, but part of that approaching is moving a little bit closer to the vacuum. And I'm not necessarily saying to stand right next to it, a direct approach, but are they coming back to me to say, okay, I'm comfortable moving around it, and then I am reinforcing it by giving them that space to move away. Yes, you could put the treats down in the direction of something, but we really want to avoid, I like to think of it more as the dog choosing to move away from something. So if you have a dog that has a tendency to react to something, overreact really, we're using this game as a way for the dog to practice disengaging from it. So turning away, moving away from it. And so I like to think of it as moving away. And so sometimes that involves us going back to our starting point, but I don't want people to think of it as I am using this treat to get you to approach something. And if there is any concern about that, I would probably set it up a little differently, or I might use one of the other patterns. And I'm actually going to show a couple of scary people that use patterns for scary things that gives the dog a start button to choose to approach. Oh my goodness, I just echoed.
Okay, that's it for now. If
Okay.
we have more questions directly related to what you're talking about, I will text you again.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. So next up is window barking, which I know is one that a lot of people struggle with. And in the previous webinar that I mentioned, I have a video demo of me playing this Give Me a Break game with Obi-Wan at the window. So he is essentially practicing disengaging from the window and coming to get me. And so I started off at short distances, and I eventually started going to all sorts of different places in the house. And my end goal was that anything happening outside the window would become a context cue that says, oh, I need to go report this to my person, rather than I need to bark at whatever is out there to tell them to go away. That is my end goal. And so I'm calling this video part 2 because it's essentially that next step. That first video, I did it specifically at a quiet time when I didn't think there was going to be anything outside the window. If something had happened, that would have been fine, but I didn't want there to be like constant bombardment of people and dogs and wildlife. I just wanted him to get in this habit of leaving the window to come and get me. And so this is video showing you some deliberate setups that I did to take it to that next step. And I did want to mention one other thing. The very first thing I would recommend for a dog that window barks is limiting their access to that stimulus. So I did have coverings on the window so that the dog could not see out the window while we were practicing. And I had one window that the dog was able to look out of they would only be able to look out of when I was there, to be able to reinforce the behaviors that I was looking for. And so part of that is because we really want to avoid them practicing this other behavior that we want to be extinguishing while we're building up the new behavior. And part of it is also, there's a bit of trigger stacking going on here. So if the dog is seeing something and the adrenaline and then seeing, you know what I mean? So they're never at that low level, and taking that out of the equation so that the dog isn't constantly seeing things out of the window is really going to put them in a better headspace to be able to successfully do these patterns and play this game when we are actively working on it. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. So let me play this video, and then I think we have a couple questions, so we'll do that after.
Good boy for coming to tell me.
So just a couple things I want to note here. I did end up putting a snuffle mat by that back window. We're much more likely to see people and dogs out that window than the front windows. And that little decompression piece can be very helpful. I never was able to get a video of a dog passing by. He just never saw one. So we never did get any of that, but it would essentially be the same thing. And we would, again, doing those deliberate setups where it's someone he knows outside. And then we've added a neighbor or somebody that's not his, one of his household people. And, and you could have helpers for that. And then working up to maybe wildlife or dogs or all of that. So, all right, what questions do we have?
Okay, let me see where we left off. Would window barking be similar to dogs barking at the fence?
Yes. And it's a lot harder to, I shouldn't say it's harder, but yes. And yes, I do use Give Me a Break. But it involves more work from you because you're going to have to go out with the dog when they're out in the yard. If you want to prevent that, again, practicing that fence barking or fence fighting, I would recommend having them maybe starting off with them on leash so that we could also control proximity. But it would basically be the same concept of in using that management so that they're not practicing the behavior you want to extinguish, and being there so that they could be learning those new behaviors. So Give Me a Break, disengaging, that concept of coming to tell you about something. Latte is something you're going to see in the backyard, because I'm definitely going to address this because, again, it's something that a lot of dogs struggle with. And so lots of different patterns and different practice of behaviors that we would prefer that they engage in with that stimulus. But yes, the short answer is yes.
Okay, would you use the same pattern games with hearing sounds outside rather than seeing the stimuli?
Yes, you can definitely use Give Me a Break when there is outside noise. Yes, definitely. And you'll notice that I started off with just visual and then I added that auditory. I do recommend separating those out. So if both can be triggering for your dog, you definitely want to start with one and maybe work on those individually before you pair them together. But this is a great option. And I jokingly refer to it as listen to that. So the look at that game with sounds is also, and I really, in these things, the window barking, the fence fighting, the reacting to sounds, I really think of Give Me a Break being paired with look at that, because essentially they're reporting to you, which is a look at that concept. But the Give Me a Break is what basically lets them know that they can still report even if you're not in the room, because typically with look at that, we're right there with the dog. And so I really like that concept of pairing those ideas together.
So I already asked you about if it would work for door barking.
Yes.
Or did I not?
Well, you didn't, but the answer is yes. And actually, this window in the picture that you're seeing right now is actually a back glass door. So yes. Now, but if you're talking, let me just say one thing on that. If you are talking about dogs reacting to the doorbell or door knocking, then you would obviously have to incorporate that into the pattern.
All right. And here is someone who says that her dog does things so well when treats are involved, over and over, great response. But if he's not getting paid, he's right back to old behaviors. We've been practicing some things for over a year. And once it's established, once it's established that I have treats, he'll do it. But otherwise, no. Some behaviors do sync, but not others. how do we get him to learn to calm in some settings, barking at the window when he's not getting paid every single time?
Yes, this is a very difficult concept. And it again involves the some increments, so appropriate increments. There's a lot of different concepts involved in this. So one is rate of reinforcement. So how often they are getting reinforced for this behavior. If reinforcement goes away entirely, then the behavior extinguishes because there's nothing reinforcing it. Now, there are lots of different things that reinforce a behavior. Barking out the window at a person who walks by and the person disappears, that reinforces the barking because, hey, it worked. So in terms of this idea of payment and treats, reinforcement history is going to be a very important concept. So if the dog has a very strong association of something that reinforcement essentially being something that has the behavior occurring more often, whatever that reinforcement is, if it's treats or getting access to something, we want that to be very strong. We do not want that to go away. But there's also this concept, and again, this is a foundation behavior, but default behavior is a great one for this, because what we don't want is for the dog to sit for a treat and they've been treated, and then the dog's like, well, I'm going to sit again, and I'm going to sit again. We want to build some duration in here and some trust that it's going to work. So even if I don't notice that you have sat down in front of me, or if you're going to your station while I'm in the kitchen and preparing food, there's some patience there that when I am done preparing the food, there's going to be reinforcement for making that choice. So I'm not, when I first started that behavior of going to place, there was a very high rate of reinforcement. I might be going over there every 30 seconds, every couple minutes. And now it's at the point where they settle until I'm done, and then I still reinforce it. Could I not pay every time they do it? Yeah, as long as I keep that percentage relatively high. But I'm okay with reinforcing that behavior every time they do it. That's worth it to me. But I think the real concept here is that ability to wait and that ability to settle is what really needs to be incorporated in there. And that's where that foundation piece really comes in, that ability to be calm and, the take a breath and the settling on a mat. And so that's where you start to build in some duration and some downtime along with these concepts. So the being able to disengage, and then the second part is being able to calm down.
All right. Someone else wants to know what to do if her dog is too stressed to take treats in public. And one of the questions was, is there some pattern game that you would recommend doing that could help with that? Maybe something she could start at home.
Yes. So the short answer is that is a threshold issue. Whether it's fear or anxiety based, or whether it's just an overwhelm. For some dogs, that step outside is like going to a rock concert. They're just constantly bombarded with stimulus and they just can't think. They're not operant. There's a lot of different reasons why a dog may not take food outside. Whatever that case is, we need to figure out a way to be able to bring them below threshold. And so if I were to make suggestions, my first suggestion would be to start to bring that outside and to the inside. So yes, doing a pattern, whether it's up, down, or ping pong, or whatever pattern you want to choose indoors. And then you could start with opening a window. So there's some outside sounds. They can't see, but they can hear. And then maybe the window's closed and we're able to see, or maybe you're at a sliding door and they're able to see the outside. And so again, that key is, where can you start that the dog can be below threshold and start to work towards that goal of being outside and have them still be comfortable to eat. And I'm also going to say, for some dogs, it's just the outside environment is so exciting that food is not of interest because they're being bombarded with that. And that's just something that we would have to work on. But if there is an anxiety component and that sort of thing, and the dog can't ever get below it, it might be worth doing a consult with a veterinary behaviorist. And so, there's a lot of questions in there, but talking with a professional trainer would probably be a great first step to identify, is it at that point, or is this something where we can successfully start somewhere that the dog is able to engage and eat treats successfully, and then slowly bring that to where they can take treats outside. And that taking treats outside may be on the porch. Like, oh my gosh, that's great. Your porch or your patio, can they do it there? That's a win. We're going to start inside, and then we're going to slowly bring that out. And you could be going from inside to outside with a Super Bowls pattern and then back in. So, I don't want to get too specific and take too long, but there's a lot of different stuff going in there. So I probably took longer than I should have anyway.
All right. Well, that's it for now.
All right, let's keep going. All right, here we go with the backyard. So, Latte is the newest pattern game and is actually not in any of the books because it's so brand new. It essentially adds a decompression component to the Super Bowls type pattern. So there are visual stations that the dog tells you to take them to. And those stations involve behaviors that are decompressing for dogs. Things like sniffing, licking, chewing, all things that dogs would naturally engage in, and a lot of times has a physiological effect of calming the dog or putting them in a much calmer space. And so essentially what we want is to bring that same concept to getting the dog comfortable, and also having them learn that they can engage in those types of behaviors around stimulus that may be triggering, or just, there are lots of different reasons that we would do it, and lots of goals, but this is what it looks like. I forgot to say this one is also fast. Oh. Apologies for not verbally stating the warning about the dogs barking, and also for the not great camera angle that we're off video there. But I do like to contrast these because it's just so funny to me. But dogs that are really look at that savvy hardly ever end up looking at anything. They pretty much stare at their person. And that is exactly what happened with Piper here. The second she was done, she would just look up at me. And it didn't matter if people were walking by or dogs were walking by or dogs were barking or the kids were going by on their bike. She just immediately looked up at me. So I think we have some more questions, Deborah. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. Could you, okay. Well, one person wanted to know what LATTE stands for.
Oh, the acronym is basically look at that, then enrichment. But
okay. Could you use it for a dog afraid to walk at dusk or at night? Or if he's associating that time with thunder and fireworks?
yes, I think this would be a good pattern. But again, we would want to start in a way that the dog is comfortable. So, maybe whatever that means. So if being outside at that time of day is stressful, they could start where the dog could see outside, but be inside. And then we could, again, start maybe just on the porch, or maybe we could start before it got to that time and have just a little bit of the pattern where it's starting to get into that time period. But essentially the short answer is yes, pairing these type of behaviors to help the dog decompress in a situation that is potentially stressful. And again, doing it at an intensity and level that the dog is able to be successful. Yes, that is a yes.
Someone else said they have a similar setup as in the video. The problem is that other dogs will get reactive at our fence and owners will stop there, or children will stop to taunt our dog. Controlling others is sometimes the problem. How do you handle it if the dog just barks and lunges at the fence?
Yes, great question. One of the things that I meant to point out, I don't know if that I might with Piper, but definitely with Obi, I do have him on leash because I did want to be able to control his proximity to the fence. If someone were to have come by while we were doing this, I had a setup with my children moving around. So there was something there, but it was someone that he knew. And they were doing a very low stimulus. They were just walking. They weren't on their scooter or doing anything that's a little higher in higher intensity for him. But I wanted that extra management piece so he could not go over there and get right up close to the fence if somebody was on the other side. So that's one piece is adding that management thing. Second piece is I personally am comfortable giving other people instructions. So, if I'm out on a walk and somebody is approaching me, I am totally fine literally saying, can you go to that side of the road and I'm going to go to this, you know what I mean? That sort of scenario. So if somebody was taunting my dog in the backyard, my personal comfort level would be to ask them to not do that. Or, if you wanted to be more, put out a positive spin, to ask them, to give them instructions that might help them engage more successfully. Like you could, it's not ideal, but you could ask them to be part of a training set, like incorporate them into a training session. My dog really struggles with this. Do you think you could stand there and not say anything? Or do you think you could maybe turn to the side so you're not looking at him? And then all of that, if you're not comfortable with that, then limiting your dog's access to that and trying to put up as much management as possible. Could you do visual barriers? Could you limit people's access in any way? And my setup is I'm in an HOA. This is the only fence I can have. I could not have a 6-foot fence with visual, barrier. But, it would take time, but maybe I could plant, bushes or something back there as an option. I'd still have to get permission to that. But depending on what the scenario is, being proactive and trying to limit those interactions or thinking about how you can change those interactions would be my suggestion, with the caveat that obviously you cannot control other people and it's only as willing as they are to follow directions, and if that's not the case, then trying to do as much as you can to limit that access.
Okay, that's all for now.
All right, sweet. Let's go on. Okay, so now we are moving to back inside the house to visitors. This is a video that I took with a private training client when I went to their house. And again, it's a live session, and you're going to start off seeing what happened after I don't know if I rang the doorbell or knocked on the door, but that, of course, that immediate stimulus that gets the dog going, and then you're going to see how we worked through it. We'll be choosing to come back to you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that was lovely. Did you see him
Yes.
check in with you?
Yes.
Nice job there.
Good boy.
Good job, Bailey. So he's sniffing. Oh,
Good
such
boy.
good choices. Just didn't see it. Because yeah, once I'm in the vicinity. Oh, that was lovely. Yes, very nice. Good.
Yes.
Very nice. Very nice job, Bailey. You did so good. He's like, that's nice and all, but I'm going to sit down so that you offer me a lovely treat. So even though we're focusing on pattern games, I did just want to note there's a lot of default behavior going on in there. Lots of offered sits, which is fantastic. I'm also going to say that I did not set Bailey up for success in that there are things that I could have had her do beforehand, like the treat scatter before the door is open, but I kind of wanted to show the before and after. So other things that are great for this type of scenario that weren't shown are whiplash turns. So essentially, this is a pattern of the dog practicing turning towards you when you say their name, and then it just becomes they're turning back so fast you can't even get their name in. But that concept of reorienting to you. Give me a break is another one. Could have been putting treats down next to me and then having him turn away from me and go back to them. Super Bowls. So, all sorts of different patterns can be incorporated into this, but that treat scatter is a great way of doing a reset because, again, it gets the dog engaged in that sniffing and foraging, all of that stuff. Up, down is also a great way to reset. Okay. And then here is another real life example. This is one of the recent ones that Obi was such a sport with. We just happened to have a plumber coming over and I thought, okay, I'm going to set up a video. And you'll see his face seeking. And again, this was a total last minute thing. So it's probably not the best example, but it'll at least give you a real life scenario. Again, he's good with people. So I did not have strict management here. I was being very casual with this, but you'll see what I do.
Come on in. How are you? Very nice to meet you.
Very nice.
I'm sorry. I do apologize for knocking. I'm sorry. I was
No,
like,
it was a really soft knock.
Gotcha.
It was actually
Sorry.
perfect.
Perfect.
Yes,
How
who
are
is
you?
that?
Hey. Hi.
Oh my goodness,
I probably smell
know.
I probably smell like cat. I have the cat at the house.
Well, he likes faces. He likes to greet people. Yes, that was very
No
good.
worries. No worries.
All right, so it's the
Hello.
sink.
Good afternoon. I'm Devontae.
Hi, I'm Angie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Sorry about the sliding
No.
hands there.
Not a problem. You're fine. You're fine.
All right.
Close-
Yes,
you want me to lock the door?
Okay. So there is my imperfect real life example. But again, he's not on leash because he just gets a little, he wants to greet people in their faces. So he's not a flight risk and I'm not worried about him being reactive or aggressive in any way. So there's minimal management, but some patterns that helped him make better choices. Okay. So now we're going to go on to those scary objects that we talked about. There are 2 different videos here. I will remember this time to give you the warning that it's the hair dryer in this first video is rather loud. So kind of like when the music comes on, it's a louder video. This was a homework assignment that Becky did with Anchor, where she was using voluntary 1, 2, 3. And voluntary 1, 2, 3 adds in this start button aspect where the dog controls movement. And so what we mean by a start button is the dog performs a behavior that says, do the next thing. So orienting to the person is the start button that says, do the next repetition of 1, 2, 3. And so that's what we refer to as voluntary 1, 2, 3, where instead of us just continuing to count and the dog getting a treat on 3, the dog tells us, yes, I want to keep going. And so it's a great way to ask the question, especially if you're approaching something or walking by something, is the dog comfortable? Do they want to keep going? And so we do that by putting the treat on the ground, which has the dog disengaging from us. When the dog orients, that means to continue. Now, it just so happened that both of the examples I'm using on here, the dog gives us a no, which I love because I want you to also be aware of what it looks like and also aware that it's going to look different with each dog. And so typically, we say orienting means yes. But in this first video, Anchor is so attuned to his person, he spends most of his time looking towards her. That's just his default. I mean, it's his automatic. And so a no for this type of dog is going to be much more subtle than a dog who disengages much more naturally and isn't that connected to their person. And then in the second video, I'm sort of giggling because it was actually supposed to be a setup for the stuffed cat that you're going to see the arrow point to. But I'm actually demonstrating it with the scary stimulus because there is a bag that is holding open the gate in the background. And Olivia was finding that concerning. So it ended up being a pattern game with approaching a scary stimulus. But that was an unintentional thing. So let me start this off. I'm going to pause right there because it is very subtle, but I'm going to start it over and I want you to look at the first rep versus this second rep and the way that his orienting is a little bit different. Oops, sorry. I meant to go back to the beginning and I didn't. So let's try that again. First rep. All right, I'm going to pause here. Little participant participation. That's what I was trying to say. Can anyone tell me in the chat what they noticed in that second rep that didn't happen in the first one? Yes, exactly. Yay, some great observers out there. Yeah, there was that slight movement away. He took a step away. He turned away before orienting back to her. And Christy, I'm really glad you're here because I'm using your video and I hope it's okay. So that's what it looks like for Anchor. For another dog, that just might have, well, the movement away is a pretty good indication, but had Anchor just looked at the hairdryer and then looked back up at her, for some dogs, it just depends. Sometimes that's a no, sometimes that's a yes, but a lot of dogs won't necessarily look back. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, good. So here's Olivia's cameo. Oh no, I restarted it, so I got to do this again. Okay. Oh, stop that. All right, so let me skip ahead. All right, so here we go with the unintentional bag at the gate. So I'm going to pause there. So just a couple notes on this one. Again, it was supposed to be about the cat, the stuffed cat over there on the other side of the gate that she was practicing. So a potentially exciting stimulus. And Christy, didn't it make sounds, if I'm remembering correctly? If you want to type that up really fast in the chat. I think it also made cat noises. So it wasn't just a stuffed cat, but like it making cat noises to increase its cat-like tendencies. But it ended up being that there was something else that was causing some hesitation. And so there are a couple different options. When Olivia moved back, Christy could have gone back to the first bowl, or she could have done exactly what she did and said, okay, are you comfortable moving forward again? And if Olivia had said no at that same bowl, then we could have done some reassessing. So maybe we move the bowls further away, or maybe we just go back down to the beginning and, we keep asking. And if we keep getting stuck at that same place, then we definitely know that we need to change the setup. So lots of different options here. And again, both of these dogs made very clear no's. Where they incorporated that moving away or, went back to that previous station. And so there was some really clear communication, which is really nice. But sometimes it's not going to be that clear. And so that's why it's so important to recognize your dog and what their body language means and what those subtle no's may look like. Okay.
Christy mentioned that she missed the first no because she thought it was all about the cat.
Yes. Yeah. And it's one of those things that this is one of the reasons that I highly recommend recording, because we miss so much in the moment. And, on the video with Latte, I said, I didn't see that my dog looked at the kids. I missed it. And so there's such great detail and information that we can get from watching these things after the fact. Where we may have missed something that our dog was doing, or we may have missed something that we were doing. And so it's just such a great tool for picking up on those other things. But yeah, especially when you have it in your head, this is about the cat, and, the cat isn't concerning. It may be exciting, but, and so absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Christy, for your input. I do think there are a couple questions on here. Deborah, is that right?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There are.
I missed that.
It's well. Let's see.
I did see somebody ask
my
where
dog
the
is
hairdryer
too
was.
excited to attend to treat scatter, like every morning when my husband comes downstairs. A gadget called Soothing Saucer is working well. Do you know what Soothing
I'm
Saucer
not familiar
is?
with that. Maybe Patty, you can share in the chat what that is. That would be a great, we're always looking for new tools to help out. The question that I saw, Deborah, was where the hairdryer was, and I just glanced and saw it again. The hairdryer was up against the half wall here. So you can see the plug there, and the hairdryer is connected to that. So they were moving a direct approach toward the hairdryer in that scenario.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you saw that.
All right. And Christy said, yes, there were cat sounds going. Okay. All right. So here is another setup with a different type of pattern game, where this time I think the cat is a little more what's being paid attention to than the bag. But yes, real life curveball. Absolutely. And they happen. Boy, do they. That's unintentional. So again, we see the stuffed cat on the stool. I'm pretty sure there are audio sounds coming from the cat. And this time Christy is doing voluntary 1, 2, 3, not a direct approach, parallel. So yes, there's some closer and further movements from the cat, but not a direct approach. So do a little bit of this video and then see if we have any other questions.
One, two, three. 1, 2, 3. Good girl.
All right, and we will stop there. All right. Okay, I think we are good to keep going. All right, so while we are on the topic of cats and overexciting stimulus, this is another class session. This is again the cooperative counter conditioning class. We had done several sessions. This was actually our last class, and so we'd fine-tuned a couple things. And so in terms of our setup, we had learned that we need to have a bowl next to the cat so that the cat is stationed and not moving all over the place, which is a much more difficult or higher intensity for Rain, the dog. So putting a bowl on the location where the treats were going to be delivered so that the cat remained in that location was one of the things that we did for setup. We are sort of doing a mashup of a protocol called requested approach training. And again, those decompression aspects, it's not a formal latte setup, but we're using snuffle mats to incorporate that decompression aspect. So there's a snuffle mat in the room with the cat. And one of the adjustments that we made was putting a snuffle mat in the crate in the background there. So it's further away from the cat as an option if Rain wanted a little more decompression. So I want a little more time away from the cat to sort of, get a little less exposure, a little decompression time before I'm ready to go back over there and be around the cat and still make good choices. And so his movement and the things that he does is controlling where we are putting the food, which snuffle mat we're putting it on, when we're going over there. And the RAT aspect or requested approach training is incorporating this start button of the chin rest. So Rain will put his chin on that station and that says, take me over there and load the snuffle mat by the cat. So I'm going by the cat, I'm getting treats in my snuffle mat. And then what he does after that tells us what the next rep is going to be. Are we going to do the snuffle mat in the crate? Or is he going to need any extra help? Are we going back and doing another rep? So hopefully this makes more sense as you watch it. There's a lot going on here. But you will see one of our setups.
Good boy. Well, you need to go to your station there. Does it matter that it's like he's only resting for a brief second?
Nope. But what I am going to say is if he does that.
Yes, good boy.
Sorry, I cut it off. What I was saying is if he goes to the crate again, we're going to load that snuffle mat.
Very efficient. All right, good girl. Thank you. Good job.
Yep. Excellent.
That's the thing. At least the vacuum doesn't move around. Good boy. But these cats are unpredictable.
Yes.
Okay. So again, just a very short session, but we were setting up lots of structure to help Rain make good choices. So Rain is a dog that struggles to be off, very high need, like lots of, he struggles to not interact with the cats in inappropriate ways. He just gets a little overexcited around them. And so this is a difficulty or challenge that Petra has been working with for a while. And so, how does this translate to everyday life? And so, this goes back to that foundations. We want to set up a scenario where Rain can make those choices while being around the cats. So, and then we can build on that. And we're also building in choices that he can make. And so some of the things we talked about is, could Rain go get a toy and bring it to her to say, I'm getting a little overexcited and I need some help with this, so like redirect that energy. Having the snuffle mats out, and he could go to a snuffle mat to ask for some help and some of that decompression. And so, there's definitely some separation time where the dog's away from the cat. She has the crate over there that she'll cover if we need some time. So lots of other stuff going on here. But again, just a great example of sort of using some of these concepts, mashing them up, doing what works for the particular scenario, and trying to build those skills.
I do think where the cat is. Yeah. If somebody wants to know.
The cat is off to the right of the screen. So if you go back and watch the recording, and let me see if I can get it, so you can see my little arrow there. The cat's over there off to the side. So there's actually, and if you wanted more detail, the cat is on, I think it's like a dresser or buffet or something. So the cat is literally up where the arrow is pointing, so not on the ground. So again, a little bit further away to make it easier. That's much easier intensity than having the cat on the ground. But the cat's not in a crate or any of that stuff. And all of those things are going to play into our starting point depending on the dog and the situation. But those are all things that we think about in terms of trying to set them up to make the choices or make some choices that are more acceptable, at least for us.
Do you want the other question now too?
Sure.
Is 1, 2, 3 strictly management, or can it help with a conditioned emotional response in dog-dog reactivity? Her 1-year-old dog can get by other dogs on walks with 1, 2, 3 and kibble tossed in the grass while they pass, but she's not seeing a progression from there.
Okay, that's an interesting question. I do not think of 1, 2, 3 as management. I think of patterns more as that structure. So creating a structure in which the dog is able to process the environment and make better choices. And so what that says to me is that dog still requires that structure at this point in time. Yes, our end goal is to eventually get to a point where we may not need it or may not need it as, let me see if I can say this. So it may start off that your dog can only stay in the 1, 2, 3 pattern when you're 100 feet away from another dog. And then over time, we can get to 50 feet and they can successfully stay in the pattern. And then maybe we can get to just across the street. And so there may be progression occurring there, but they still need that structure. But hopefully, because we have that structure and they're able to be successful, what's happening over time is that their threshold is increasing in that there is more before they reach it. So like they can be closer or the intensity can be a little higher before so we are changing where that threshold is. But we may reach a ceiling depending on the dog and their needs, or it just may be that it takes a long time and we haven't quite got there yet. But one of the keys to this is that the dog is actually processing, and we're not doing that the dog isn't so focused on the person that they're not seeing the dog at all, because then we have this, I'm able to get my dog by, but it's not necessarily providing that structure of the dog, like, oh, sometimes when I 1, 2, 3 walk, a dog passes by and that's okay. It's like, oh, my person's doing 1, 2, 3 and I'm going to be glued to them and I don't even know that there's a dog over there. In that scenario, we may not be seeing progression because the dog isn't processing that. And I'm not saying your dog has to be looking at the other dogs. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that may be one scenario where you are not seeing a difference because there isn't that aspect of it. But ideally, the structure of the pattern allows us to make progression in changing that threshold and how much the dog can handle. And we should be over time able to make some progression in that. So again, I hope that was not too convoluted. Okay. Speaking of 1, 2, 3. Oh, good. We're going to see that in action. So this is probably my only video where I have like teaching a pattern in here, but
yeah, and keep
this
going.
is great for leash manners.
Perfect. And then see if you can keep going and see if you can pivot to get her on your left side. Yep. And then keep going. 1, 2. Perfect. Yep. And so now you just bring the hand down on 3 to give her a treat. And you just keep counting. Good.
1, 2, 3.
Good. And let's slow it down a little more.
1, 2, 3.
Perfect.
1, 2, 3.
And you can see there.
I'm looking at the time. A note, yes, ideally we would want to introduce this concept inside, but I would recommend going through those same steps the first time that you introduce it outside. This was COVID times, so we weren't doing indoor training. So that's why it was done outside. Yeah, just wanted to put that in there. Some other great patterns for loose leash walking are 2-step. In the previous webinar, I go over the Super Bowls hack of using repeating things in the environment as our stations for using Super Bowls for loose leash walking. So I didn't put it in here. I just want to make sure we get time for questions at the end. And here are some examples of setups that I have done with my dog. So one of the things I told you that is triggering for him is people on scooters or bikes or, fast moving. So here are some different patterns and things that I did to work through that. Okie dokie.
Were
All
those
right.
neighborhood kids that
No,
she
those are
taught
my
to do
kids.
that?
Yes. So we
Okay, so
started
it
with
was
the
a setup and
correct.
okay.
Yep. Because he was doing well, then we went on a walk together.
And did you have to pay your kids?
I did not. They love to do this kind of
Oh,
stuff.
good.
They are great helpers and volunteers.
There it is.
Actually, let me see if I need to set up anything on here. Oh, okay. So this is us on a walk, starting off with the concept of reorienting at the door. That's that same whiplash turn concept. And then you're going to see us pass different people and some dogs. Oh, I lied. Here we go. Let's try this again.
There it is. Yes, good puppy. Such a good puppy. One, two, three. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Ready, Daddy? Just flying through these last 3 so that we can get to it. And I might skip around on here. Actually, let me again introduce this. So now we're on to like going out and about. So these are arrival skills for going somewhere. So of course you first want to start off where it's really easy. I don't want to introduce this concept with my dog out someplace exciting. So this is a video of going over these exiting from the car skills in my driveway. And then you'll see some examples of taking it on the road, so to speak.
Okay. Yes, good puppy. Extra. Yes. 1. Oh, you're so good. Okay. Yes, good boy. Good boy. Ready? Okay. Yes. Good job. Yes. Yes. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes, good boy. Come here. Try that again. Come here, kiddo.
An unsuccessful test.
All right, up. Obi-Wan. Can you go? Oh, very nicely done. Yes, good boy. Yes, good boy. Good job.
All right. So that second video where he wasn't successful, using a little bit of Premac there, because what he really wants is to get going. And access to that environment comes from reorienting to me. So when he doesn't successfully reorient, oh, we have to start over in the car. And then the second time he's like, oh yeah, okay, I remember what to do. So
Do you want a few more questions?
yeah, let's do it.
Do you use 1, 2, 3 at random on walks or only for triggers? If only for triggers, does it become a predictor of a stressor?
The answer is no, I do not only use it for triggers, because yes, it does become a predictor. So part of this is you definitely want to use it at random times and in other scenarios so that it doesn't become. And actually on that as we were doing this, I figured out that I had just bought a GoPro to do some of these videos, and I figured out that the sound of the GoPro turning on clued him in that there was something in the environment, because I was recording when I was like, oh, we need something here. So I had to turn the audio off there, but they are so good at that. So yes, we definitely do not want it to be associated with, oh, they only start patterns when there's something worrisome out there. Great question.
And Linda wants to know whether holding the treat hand to the chest while doing up down is actually luring. That's her opinion, that it is.
I could think of it that way. I was doing that because it allowed me to do faster reps of putting the next treat down rather than fumbling with the treat pouch each time. I'm not thinking of it as luring. I wasn't thinking of it intentionally, and I certainly do it without that sometimes. But you know, part of the up down game is they're looking up at you in anticipation of that next treat. So my own concern, I mean, I'm not concerned about that personally. Certainly if you had any concerns about that, you could just get one treat out at a time or have your hand behind your back. Yeah.
And the last question for now is, when 1, 2, 3 is working, but suddenly the dog is distracted by something in the environment and doesn't respond to 3, should I toss a treat in front of the dog so that the reinforcement is always on 3?
Great question. That's where I would start to be going into my get out of dodge mode. So if tossing a treat helps your dog refocus, I will use that as a strategy to get some distance between my dog and whatever is the thing. So if they didn't look at me, probably the first thing I'm going to do is stick a treat in front of their nose and see if that gets them to then follow it. If they're not paying any attention to the treat, then I'm going into those emergency protocols because we've already reached the point where we're not getting any response. But if they just need a little bit of help, I would definitely incorporate that. Like, oh, look, there's a treat right in front of you. Can you turn around for this? Or can you go chase it in that direction, moving further away? Yeah. And if I'm doing that, sometimes I'll do the 1, 2, 3 game where the treat is tossed on 3 each time. So I'm continuing the pattern and that structure to help them, but I'm very quickly moving them in a different direction.
I'm going to throw in one more question that's pretty general. Donna just wants to confirm there's no use of a marker like yes or a click with pattern games. Is that right?
So you can. The regular version of 1, 2, 3 walking, 3 means treat. So we do not use an additional marker because saying 3 is the marker, so to speak. And we're not actually, that's only the original version because we're not actually marking behavior. We're just saying that the treat becomes available on 3. That pattern game is the only one where the dog doesn't have that start button feature of telling you to do the next rep. So we're not marking a particular behavior the dog does. We're just saying 3, hey, here's a treat. And then, you know, is the dog right there in anticipation or are they coming back for it? The only other pattern game that does not have a marker versus you could use a marker is Give Me a Break. And that's because the markable moment would be when the dog reorients, and often we're not facing the dog at that point. You know, we're going to sit on a chair and the dog is coming over to us and that causes us to stand up, but we aren't marking them getting there. Or if we're walking away, you know, you could acknowledge it verbally that they've got to you and great job and that stuff, but we are not quote unquote marking it with like a clicker or a marker word. I believe every other pattern game you can use a marker. So when the dog looks up, and there were definitely some where I was using yes as my marker. I wasn't using a clicker in any of these, but the dog looks up, yes, and then I do the next rep. I will freely admit that I sometimes mark and I sometimes don't. But you can do it with a marker or without a marker, with the exception of those 2 patterns.
Okay, that's it. So go back to your slides.
All right. Well, this should be familiar for anyone who's watched my stuff because I've done it before, but I shortened it so it was just the patterns, but to give you an example of how pattern games could be used in public places for those who may not have seen it. All right, and one more real life scenario here. So this was someone who took my Control Unleashed class and happened to be local to me and did agility with their dog. And one of the challenges that they were facing is at some point in the history of going to the agility center, there had been a tennis ball up against this wall. And Nova, the dog, had a history of leaving the agility ring when they were working to go check out this wall. And I said, oh, this is a perfect example of using Give Me a Break, because again, our end goal is for the dog to, well, it depends on the scenario, but one of the benefits of Give Me a Break is the more you release the dog to the environment, the less they want to be released and the more they want to engage with you. So if we're doing our setup appropriately, that should be the response that we're getting. And so this, I actually went to where she took agility, and this was just a class. So it was the agility class and where they did the training. And so I went one day and they very generously allowed me to go and get some video of this. So you can see how it goes, or how we did our setup.
Yes. Very good. Good. All right.
All right, so do one more over there. And I'm gonna have you walk further away this time.
Yes.
Go sniff, go check the wall out, and if she comes back to you, then you're going to do another one.
Good. Good girl. Sit. Yes. Yeah.
And then send her back. All right. And then, yep. And then send her back. We don't want to get too greedy. She was doing so good. We want to make sure that you send her before she leaves you. No, I don't want to go over there. Then that's her telling you she wants to do more agility. Yes.
Okay, good. Come here. Yay, girly. Go. Whoops. Ouch. Good. All right, nice job. Whoops. Woo!
Right. All right, so let me do the wrap up and then we'll take those final questions. So these are the key takeaways that I hope you will get from this webinar. One, keeping your dog sub-threshold is the key to success. Two, you need to build a foundation by setting your learner up for success. So that's where those setups that you saw some examples of, rather than just going out into the real world. Three, use small increments, those small steps to help your dog reach the goal. And four, these games are flexible so that you can adjust them to suit the animal and the situation that you are in. And I did glance a question that actually leads right into that. So if there is a mobility issue that makes putting treats on the ground difficult, there are definitely things you can do. Dropping treats is an option. I will say it tends to work better for people that are really good about their placement, because sometimes treats can, roll or not go where the dog can find them. And sometimes that can interrupt the flow of the pattern. Or for some dogs, that's a little bit too exciting. But that is one option. The other option is sometimes you can just feed low, like especially if the orienting to the person is the start button we're looking for. So feeding low so the dog is looking down gives us that same concept of allowing the dog to then orient to us. And then, there are other things that you could do. So like if you have a dog that's down low or it's hard to down low, I saw this great do-it-yourself treat delivery tool that was like a wooden spoon, and they had taped one of those little Gladware bowls on the end so you could put the treat in that and then hold it down. So, I mean, there are all sorts of things that you can do, but the short answer is yes, we want you to be able to tailor this so that you can utilize it. It is not meant to be rigid and this is the way it has to be and this is the way it has to look.
Trish says that she's used a spatula with frozen baby food.
Mm-hmm. Yep, another great example.
All right. Now, this is similar to an earlier question. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah. Do reactive, not aggressive dogs ever become non-reactive with these games, or is the goal just management?
I don't think of these goals as management. I mean, these games as management. I do think of them as having a counter conditioning component. I think the Ken Ramirez quote was that it's counter conditioning with an operant base. And so the pattern game at the vet video, Piper is a reactive dog. She and I have done a lot of work. And that was a vet that is a very active. There were lots of people and animals in there, and she never went above threshold. Yes, she needed help with the games. The games were able in that scenario to help her be successful in that environment. We haven't gotten to the point where she doesn't need, well, we hadn't. That's not an option anymore. Unfortunately, we just lost Piper this summer, but in that scenario, she still needed help. Could we go on a walk and pass by dogs without her reacting? Yes, we could. Now, if we passed by a fence where the dog was running along the fence and barking at her, she would definitely still need the structure of a pattern or look at that to help her with that environment. And so, it's all just a process, and it's going to depend on the dog, where they're starting. Sometimes our end goal needs to be adjusted depending on the dog in front of us. But yes, it's not just a management and distraction. The goal is to help our dogs be able to be in these environments and not overreact to them or be afraid of them, or, whatever challenge you are facing with your dog or challenge your dog is facing.
And actually, with these questions, I keep thinking, does it matter that much? You're able to walk with your dog.
Yeah,
a lot of people, that would be a win.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, that is my end goal, is as long as I have the tools for my dog to be able to successfully handle the environments in which we are in, I'm personally okay with that. But I do think it's different than management, because management implies this concept of you're never addressing the challenge. You're just setting it up so that the dog isn't facing that challenge to a certain aspect. I mean, management, we need management. Management is essential, but this goes beyond that. These are not just management tools. Yeah.
Yeah. You're creating the association. Okay. Give me a break for distractions. If a corner of the barn is a lure and the dog doesn't want to initially disengage voluntarily from sniffing there, any suggestions?
Well, I mean, part of the give me a break game is the freedom to make that choice. So sometimes there is going to be longer sniffing before the dog re-engages. In that scenario, I would suggest not moving too far away. So you being closer, the dog is a lot more likely to remember that you're there. Alternatively, you could start not going all the way over there. So like maybe you could have a barrier, or you could be putting the treat down a little bit further away from that, and the dog is able to successfully disengage at that distance. And then as they're more successful at disengaging, then you can get closer or remove the barrier. But it's okay if the dog doesn't immediately come back to you, especially at the beginning, because part of what we're doing is sending them back there. And again, it's got that Premack principle aspect of the more you send them over there as your idea and release them to that environment, the less interested they're going to be. And again, it's all going to depend on, if there is some fascinating scent or food over there, it's going to be a while before that interest wanes. And so we may need to decrease the luring potential of that until we can get to that point. But yeah, when you're first doing this, you may not get. And just in that give me a break example at agility, I mean, when we did our first couple reps, Nova definitely checked it out for, a while before she came back to the person, and that was a-okay. And, once we started doing it, our goal was to send her before she left. So it was always the handler's idea to, hey, go check out that wall. Why don't you go see if there's another tennis ball over there? And you could see in that last one, Nova's like, no, I don't want to go over to that wall. Come on, let's keep going. This is fun.
All right. I know if I start to thank you, questions will come in. So guys, this is the last call. If you have a question, now's the time. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Someone just said, well, there are a few things going on here. For me, management, no learning is taking place. The pattern games allow the dog to make a choice because they learned the pattern. And Carrie replied to that last question. You might put an X pen to keep the dog at more of a distance from the scent, so it's not quite as tempting. Then decrease that distance as he gets better at give me a break.
Exactly. That barrier aspect, or where you're starting from. Yep. Great suggestion.
Okay. So Angie, thank you so much. This was a great webinar, and it will be immortalized on video. And for all of you, if you go to Control Unleashed on our website, the Control Unleashed classes, at the bottom, you can get on a notification list so that when the next one is scheduled, you will be notified. Okay, well, thank you, Angie. This was terrific.
Well, thank you for having me.
We'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.